The worst part wasn't the joke itself. It was the laughter, loud, genuine, unforgiving. The sound hit me like a slap, over and over again, and in the middle of it all stood my father, grinning like he'd just delivered the punchline of the year. "My little girl over here, she'll probably be managing a Wendy's in no time," he said, nodding at me with that smug smile he always used when he thought he was being funny. "So hey, if any of you need a Baconator, you know who to call." I smiled, or at least I think I did. My cheeks were frozen, stretched into something that might have looked polite from a distance. Inside, I was sinking, drowning. My name is Sophia Hale. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I've spent most of my life watching the people around me get applauded for work I helped carry, and tonight, at my father's retirement party, a celebration I had helped plan, cater, and even partially fund, I got reduced to a fast food punchline in front of 200 guests. It wasn't just friends and family in the room. There were clients, investors, people I'd grown up calling uncle and aunt, who now wore expensive watches and passed business cards under the table. They all laughed, even my brother Noah, who smirked and gave me that little shrug, like, "What can you do? He's just being dad." I could feel my dress clinging to my back, not from nerves, from sweat, from heat, from the pressure of pretending like this was okay. My cousin Riley leaned over and whispered, "He didn't mean anything by it. You know how he is." I nodded, because yes, I did know how he was. My dad tapped his glass again and pointed across the ballroom. "But seriously, let's raise one more round for the future of Hale Imports. My son Noah. Couldn't ask for a better man to take over." Applause. Loud, thunderous. I clapped too, because what else was I supposed to do? Stand up and shout. I've been working in that office since I was 19, handling logistics, covering for Noah when he went off to Cabo for 3 weeks without notice. I glanced toward the back of the room where the servers were lined up in black and white. I felt more kinship with them than anyone in that crowd. At least they were getting paid for their time tonight. After the speech, my Aunt Cheryl pulled me into a half hug and said, "You know he was just teasing. Your dad's got a strange sense of humor." I smiled again. I was getting good at that, but my hands were cold, and my chest felt hollow. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time he'd made a joke like that on a microphone, with an open bar and 100 witnesses. I'd been the silent one for years, the one who picked up the slack when Mom got sick, the one who learned bookkeeping just to help Dad keep the business afloat when Noah dropped out of college the second time. But I was never the heir. I was never even in the running. "You're good with the day-to-day," Dad had told me once, "but you're not the face. People want someone who can close deals." Translation: someone who looked and sounded like Noah, as I watched him raise his glass again, smiling for pictures with board members. All I could think was how fast he'd crashed Mom's car at 17 and blamed it on me, and how Dad had believed him without even asking for my side. I blinked hard. This wasn't new, it was just public now, and something about that made it unbearable. I looked down at my plate. The roasted chicken had gone cold, just like the years of silent service I'd given to this family, cold, forgotten. I stood up from my chair and made my way toward the exit, heels clicking across polished floors. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed I was leaving. The drive home felt endless. The night was dark, but I barely noticed the road. My hands gripped the wheel tightly as I replayed my father's words over and over again in my mind. "Wendy's," he'd said. A joke. To them, a joke. To me, it felt like a verdict. Like they had drawn a line between me and the rest of the world. The air in the car was thick with silence. Not the kind that accompanies the end of a good night. The kind where you can breathe deeply and reflect. This was a heavy, suffocating kind of quiet. I rolled the windows down, letting the cool night air rush in, but it didn't help. The weight of the party, of the years, pressed down on me. I turned the music up louder, desperate to drown out the thought that kept nagging at me. They didn't think I belonged. They never had, not really. I saw the moment my mother fell ill, how she lost her voice to cancer, how it was just me taking care of everything, the doctor's visits, the late nights with her when my father and brother vanished, leaving me to shoulder the burden when she could barely speak. It was me who held her hand, who made sure her needs were met. I pushed my own needs aside, telling myself it was just temporary, just until she was well again, but she never got well. She passed, and with her went any hope that maybe, just maybe, the family would finally see me. Maybe they'd see that I'd given everything for them, for us. But Noah, he was never expected to do anything like that. He was off at school, at his friends' places, living the life he always wanted. When he came home, it was for a weekend of hunting or camping with his friends, or for a few hours of visiting before leaving again. Dad had spent the past few years making it clear Noah was the one who was going to take over the family business, not me. The idea that I might be considered for that role had never even crossed anyone's mind. I was the backup, the safety net, the one who would take care of things when things got rough, but never the one to lead, never the one to own it. I couldn't do this anymore. This wasn't just about tonight, about the joke. This was about all the years of neglect, of being overlooked, of being dismissed as not good enough. It was about all the sacrifices I'd made and the people who never noticed. And as I turned the corner onto my street, I knew it. I had to do something. The silence in the car mirrored the silence I had felt for years. That was over now. This feeling of injustice. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep sense of betrayal. Something that had been growing inside me for years and had finally reached its boiling point. I wasn't just going to sit by anymore, not after everything I had done for this family. It was time to make sure they saw me, finally. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, staring out at the darkened house, the house that had never felt like mine, despite all the times I had sacrificed for it. Despite everything I had given, the idea that had been forming in my mind over the drive, this wasn't going to be easy, but it was time to take control. I wasn't going to let them keep pushing me down. Not anymore. I hadn't expected it. In fact, I didn't even know what I was expecting when I answered the call from Ryan, the family lawyer. But it certainly wasn't this. Sophia, it's Ryan. I think we should meet. There's something you need to know. His voice, usually so calm and businesslike, sounded unusual, urgent even. About what? I asked, my pulse quickening. Your mother left something for you, something important. I agreed to meet him at the local cafe, a quiet place just a few blocks from the office. My mind raced the entire drive there. My mother had always been private about certain things, her illness being one of them. I thought I knew everything there was to know about her final wishes, but this call, this tone in Ryan's voice, this was different. When I arrived, Ryan was sitting at a corner table, his fingers nervously tapping on a folder. I sat down across from him, my mind already starting to jump to conclusions. What is it, Ryan? What's going on? He hesitated for a moment before sliding the folder across the table toward me. My hand trembled slightly as I took it, the weight of the unknown pressing down on my chest. I wasn't supposed to share this until now, he began, his voice low, almost regretful. But your mother's will. She left you something significant, more than you could have imagined. I opened the folder, scanning the pages of legal documents. Then I saw it, the letter. My mother's handwriting, neat but shaky in places, as if written in the final days of her life. Sophia, my darling, I know you've always worked hard to prove your worth, but the world has never truly recognized what you've done for this family. Not your father, not Noah, and certainly not the people at Hale Imports. They've never seen you for what you are, but I do. I've always seen you. I blinked, my heart pounding as I read the words over and over again. I've left you the majority shares in Hale Imports. You are the rightful heir to the business, not Noah. You're the one who's kept it running, who's kept it alive. Your father may not see it now, but you will take over. I believe in you, and I know you will take the company to new heights. I felt the world shift beneath me, my breath catching as I tried to process the weight of what she had left behind. Majority shares? My mother had made sure I would never be erased from the family legacy, even if no one had ever bothered to consider me for it. Ryan's voice brought me back to the present. I've reviewed everything, Sophia. Your mother's instructions were clear. The shares, the control, they were all left to you. I stared at the letter, the words blending into one another as I processed the enormity of what my mother had done. She believed in me, more than my father had, more than Noah ever would. It was all here, in black and white. You've been kept in the dark for far too long, Ryan continued. And it's time you take control. This isn't just about money, it's about power. It's about reclaiming what's rightfully yours. I nodded slowly, the enormity of it all sinking in. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope my mother had known. She'd known how much I was overlooked, how much I was dismissed, but she'd also known how to protect me. She had made sure that when the time came, I would have the power to change everything. Why didn't she tell me, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why keep this from me until now? Ryan sighed. Your mother didn't want to burden you. She didn't want to add to the stress of everything else you were already handling. She believed you'd find out when the time was right, and clearly, that time is now. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision already starting to settle in. I could feel the anger building up too, the anger for the years I'd spent being sidelined, for the constant rejection from my family. But that anger wasn't going to hold me back. It was time to act. This was my chance to step out of the shadows and claim what was rightfully mine, and I wouldn't let anyone stop me. I looked up at Ryan, my resolve firming. We're going to make this public soon. It's time everyone knew the truth. Ryan gave me a sharp nod. I'll start preparing the paperwork. But Sophia, just remember, this won't be easy. Your father and Noah, they won't take this lightly. I'm ready, I said, the words tasting like steel in my mouth. Let's do it. The evening was drawing to a close, but the weight in my chest wasn't letting up. The laughter and chatter around me felt like a distant hum as I stood by the grand fireplace, staring out into the ballroom. The party was everything my father had hoped for, grand, elegant, and full of people who would praise him for his achievements. But none of it mattered to me anymore. What mattered was what was hidden behind the facade. I could still feel the sting of my father's words echoing in my ears. Sophia, my little girl, she'll probably be working at Wendy's someday, he joked, as the crowd laughed and my heart sank. The mockery had never been so public, so blatant. I glanced at Noah, standing off to the side with a glass of champagne in his hand. He was enjoying the applause, soaking in the attention that he always seemed to get. I watched the way he laughed at the jokes about me, the way he leaned in a little closer to my father, to the guests, to the investors, all while I stood at the periphery, ignored. The truth hit me harder than ever. It was never about what I could offer, never about the work I'd done. It was always about appearances, and I had been invisible in my own family. But tonight, that would change. I walked quietly through the hallway, away from the main party. Ryan had arranged to meet me in a private room upstairs, away from the noise. When I entered, he was already seated at the table, paperwork scattered in front of him. He looked up, his face a mix of sympathy and resolve. Are you sure about this? Ryan asked, his voice low. I nodded, my mind clearer than it had been in years. It's time, I said. They don't get to keep pretending. My mother left something for me, and I'm not letting it go to waste. Ryan's fingers brushed over the papers before him. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a thick envelope. I could feel the cold weight of it. It wasn't just legal paperwork. It was everything I'd fought for in the shadows of my family's expectations. It was my future. These are the documents that will reveal your mother's will, Ryan said. I've made sure everything is in order. It's airtight. I took a deep breath and slowly opened the envelope. There it was. Everything she had left for me. Everything she'd kept secret. A majority stake in the company. Control, it wasn't just about the inheritance, though. It was about the recognition, the power, and the legacy. I read the letter from my mother again, her words fresh in my mind, and something inside me shifted. My mother had done everything she could to protect me, to make sure I wasn't erased from the family legacy. She had seen the way they treated me, the way they pushed me aside, and she had made sure I would have the chance to claim what was mine. Your mother wanted you to take this step when the time was right, Ryan continued, his gaze steady on me, and I believe that time is now. I placed the letter back into the envelope and looked at Ryan. We'll present this tonight. We'll do it before the evening ends. I won't let them continue pretending. Ryan's eyes widened, clearly surprised by my resolve. Are you sure you want to do this in front of everyone? It's going to be explosive. I've had enough of the whispers, of being sidelined, I said. They need to see me. I need to be seen. They'll understand soon enough that I'm not the same person they've been ignoring for all these years. As I turned back toward the door, I felt a rush of adrenaline, but also a deep sense of calm. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. My mother had given me the chance to finally stand up and take control. I would honor her wishes, and I would show my family that I wasn't going to stay invisible anymore. They might not like what was coming, but it was time for the truth to come to light, and I would be the one to bring it. As I walked back down the hall to the main ballroom, the soft clink of glass and chatter filled the air again. But this time, it didn't seem so loud. The crowd, the fake smiles, the empty congratulations, all of it seemed distant. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. The decision I'd made was irreversible. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about proving that I had always been worthy. No more jokes. No more being overlooked. Tonight, I would finally take my place. The storm would arrive soon enough. The moment felt surreal. For hours, I had been preparing for this, trying to steady my nerves. And yet, now that the time had come, I wasn't sure I could hold myself together. The party continued, a blur of laughter and congratulatory words as people passed drinks and danced, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. Ryan was by my side, his expression unreadable. He'd made sure everything was in place. The legal documents, the announcements, the backup plans in case anyone tried to contest the will. But I was the one who had to take the final step. I could hear the hum of the music, the chatter of the guests, the clinking of glass. My eyes scanned the room, landing on my father and Noah, who stood at the far end, laughing together like they always did. They were so comfortable in their roles as the center of attention, so certain that the family business would stay under their control. But tonight, I would change that. The moment came during a brief lull in the evening. The music slowed, and people started gathering around, murmurs passing between them. It was time. I stood and made my way to the stage where the microphone stood, the weight of every eye in the room settling on me. I felt the cold metal of the microphone as I gripped it, trying to steady my hands. "Excuse me," I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "I have something I need to share with all of you tonight, something that affects the future of Hale Imports." The chatter died down as the crowd grew quiet. My father's eyes narrowed, his gaze darting to me, confusion flickering across his face. Noah shifted on his feet, clearly sensing that something was off. Ryan, standing just off to the side, cleared his throat and stepped forward, handing me the folder. The moment I took it, I could feel the weight of it. This wasn't just any piece of paper, it was the key to my future. My mother, as many of you know, passed away last year, I continued, the words coming out more smoothly than I had anticipated. She left behind not just memories, but a decision that will change everything for this company. I paused, letting the room grow tense. I could feel my father's eyes burning into me, his suspicion growing, but I wasn't backing down now. Ryan stepped forward, his voice clear and formal as he addressed the crowd. Sophia Hale, as outlined in this second will, has been granted the majority control of Hale Imports, effective immediately. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the confusion and disbelief on my father's face as he shook his head, but I wasn't finished yet. "You see," I said, my voice firm. My mother knew how hard I worked, how I always supported the family, even when I was never acknowledged, and so she made sure that when the time came, I would have control over this business. Not Noah, not Dad, me. My father's face flushed red as he stood up quickly. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his voice shaking. "That's not what we agreed upon. This is an error." Ryan remained calm, his expression unwavering. "The will is clear, Mr. Hale. It was signed, witnessed, and legally binding. There is no error." Noah stepped forward, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You can't be serious, Sophia. You really think you can just take everything from us? From Dad? From the company?" I took a deep breath, knowing this was it. The moment that would change everything. It's not about taking from you, Noah. It's about me finally getting what I deserve. I've spent my entire life making sure this company kept running, while you two did whatever you wanted. It's time for that to stop. I turned to the crowd, my gaze sweeping over the faces of friends, colleagues, and clients, all of whom had witnessed the way I was sidelined. This isn't about revenge. This is about stepping into the role I've always deserved. And this company will be better for it. You'll see." The room was still. Some of the guests exchanged nervous glances, while others stared at me, trying to process what had just been revealed. My father and Noah stood frozen, clearly in shock. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of power. I had finally taken control of my future. No longer would I stand in the shadows, ignored and unseen. "Thank you," I said simply, my voice strong and unwavering. Before stepping back from the microphone, the room erupted into a mixture of stunned silence and murmurs. But it didn't matter. I had done it. I had claimed my place, and I wasn't looking back. The days following the reveal were nothing like I had imagined. I thought, maybe foolishly, that once the truth was out in the open, everything would settle, the storm would pass, and I'd finally be able to claim my place. Instead, the backlash hit with full force. The first sign came in the form of an email from my father's lawyer, informing me that they intended to contest the will. It was followed by calls, messages, and visits. My father, furious and desperate, hired an entire legal team to scrutinize every detail. He couldn't accept it, and Noah? He wasted no time in trying to manipulate the media, portraying me as a villain who had taken everything from him. I'd braced myself for the legal and emotional fallout, but nothing quite prepared me for the barrage of messages, phone calls, and texts. "You don't deserve this," my father's message read. "You've ruined everything." Noah's was even more hurtful. "You think you can just walk in and take what's ours? You'll destroy everything we've worked for." I didn't respond immediately. At first, I allowed the silence to sink in. I couldn't fix everything at once. The house of cards had been built on manipulation, and now they were scrambling to figure out how to keep it standing. But I wasn't their crutch anymore. I dove into work. I spent long hours learning every part of the business that I had been kept away from for years. I knew I had to prove myself, not just to my father and brother, but to the employees who had seen me as a figurehead for so long. They needed to see that I could lead. At first, the changes I made were small, subtle, yet necessary. I began spending more time on the floor, talking with employees who had been ignored for too long, the ones who had been pushed aside, who had seen their ideas and hard work dismissed. I started rewarding them for their contributions, something my father and Noah had never bothered to do. One morning, I called a meeting with the warehouse staff. Their faces were a mix of skepticism and curiosity. I'd always been the one to stay behind closed doors with the executives, never once stepping into their world. But now I was determined to show them I valued their work just as much as any corporate decision. "We're making changes," I told them, my voice steady but firm. "And I'm not here to talk about policies or numbers. I want to know what you need to do your job better. I want to hear from you." The change in the room was immediate. I saw a flicker of hope in their eyes, hope that they hadn't seen in years. Over the next few weeks, I put into place new efficiency measures and incentive programs. I implemented changes to customer service that focused on relationship building instead of transactions. I wanted to build trust within the company, not just on the balance sheet, but with every small victory. The attacks from my father and Noah grew. My father's legal team sent a constant stream of threats, and Noah called me at least 3 times a week, trying to manipulate me into backing down. Each time, I ignored him. "You don't understand what you're doing," he would say. "You're tearing this family apart." The thing is, I had never felt more connected to myself. The anger and frustration that had weighed on me for so long had finally started to fuel something positive. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control, not just of the company, but of my own future. I knew my father and Noah would never accept me fully, but that was no longer my problem. The company had always been my mother's legacy, and now it was mine to guide. And if that meant standing alone, so be it. I focused on learning, on making a real difference. The press, the legal teams, they could try to tear me down, but I was building something that couldn't be undone. The shift had begun. The first few weeks after the reveal were filled with tension. It felt like the whole company was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to pass. Some people were nervous about the changes I was pushing through. Others were relieved that something was finally happening. The staff who had once been ignored, passed over for promotions, or treated like invisible cogs in the machine. They saw what was happening, and they were ready. I was no longer the figurehead. I was in charge, and I was going to lead this company, not just with the power my mother had left me, but with the respect I'd earned from the people who actually made things happen. The first meeting I had with the senior staff was a turning point. As I walked into the boardroom, I could feel the energy in the room shift. Some of the same faces who had barely acknowledged me before now looked up at me with a sense of expectancy. There was no pretending anymore, no hiding behind my father or Noah's influence. It was my turn. Today we're making changes, I began, my voice steady, confident, as I looked around the room. And we're doing it for the people who keep this company running, not just for the board or the investors, but for the employees who have been ignored for too long. A few people exchanged nervous glances, but I could feel the undercurrent of support. For the first time, I wasn't speaking to appease anyone. I was speaking to make a real impact. We're going to start by rewarding the people who've been carrying this company on their backs, I continued. The warehouse staff, the customer service team, the logistics department. All of you are the heart of Hale Imports. We're going to make sure you get the recognition and the compensation you deserve. The murmurs of approval that followed were like music to my ears. Finally, they were hearing me. They weren't just hearing about Noah or Dad or the way things had always been. They were hearing me. I spent the next few days in meetings, one-on-one conversations, and walkthroughs of the various departments. Every time I met with someone new, I made sure they knew that things were changing. I wasn't there to make empty promises. I was there to make real, lasting improvements. I took a particular interest in customer service and warehouse operations, two areas that had been sorely neglected under my father's and Noah's leadership. They'd always been seen as back office work, not the glamorous parts of the business, but without them, the whole operation would grind to a halt. I implemented new training programs, hired additional staff, and created incentive structures for the workers who had been stuck in low-paying, thankless jobs for years. I watched as their attitudes shifted. There was a newfound sense of pride in their work, something I hadn't seen before. At the same time, I continued to focus on the bigger picture. I began restructuring the leadership team, promoting people who had been overlooked for too long. It was about more than just fair treatment. It was about building a company that thrived on respect and equality at every level. But as the company began to change, so did the tension from my father and Noah. They were angry, of course. My father made sure to have legal teams contact me regularly, trying to find ways to discredit the will or undermine my position. Noah, he called me more than a few times, trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel guilty for taking control. You've lost sight of what really matters, he said during one phone call. This company is built on family. You're tearing everything apart. I didn't bite. I'd heard it all before. It wasn't about family. It was about power, my power. And I wasn't going to let them keep playing the same tired game. As the weeks went on, I could see the results. Employee morale improved. Productivity went up. People began trusting the leadership again, my leadership. And even more importantly, I began to feel like I was finally earning the respect I deserved. But there were still moments of doubt. Late at night, when I lay in bed, the questions would creep in. Was I doing the right thing? Would I lose it all? But every time I thought about stepping back, I remembered that I couldn't. I couldn't let fear control me anymore. I had to own this. I wasn't just fighting for a business. I was fighting for a future where I was seen, not just as a daughter or a sister, but as a leader in my own right. No matter what happened next, I was going to stand my ground. It had been months since I'd taken control of the company. I'd made changes, big ones, and the company was starting to see results. But despite all of that, despite my leadership, I knew there was one thing left unfinished, something that had been nagging at me since the moment I'd made the decision to reclaim my place. Noah. I'd tried to shut him out, tried to ignore the constant pressure from him and my father to back down, but I couldn't completely shake off the memories of our family dynamic. I knew Noah wasn't the type to let things go, especially when his own future was at stake. So when he showed up at my office one chilly Thursday afternoon, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the calmness in his voice when he spoke. Sophia, we need to talk. I looked up from my desk, my heart rate barely picking up. I'd braced myself for this. The one thing I hadn't prepared for, though, was his demeanor. He wasn't storming in, demanding answers, or trying to manipulate the conversation the way he always had. This time, he was trying to be calm, almost reasonable. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, let's get this over with." He hesitated, glancing around my office, still taking in the changes. The walls weren't just lined with paperwork anymore. I'd started bringing in new artwork, hired a few more employees. The atmosphere was different, and so was I. Noah could feel it, even if he didn't want to admit it. "I'm not here to fight," he said, settling into the chair. "I've been thinking about everything, and I want to apologize for the way things went down, for what I said. You didn't deserve that." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. This was the moment. The moment I would have to decide whether or not to let him back into my life, into the family fold. "It's a little late for apologies, Noah," I said quietly. "You've had plenty of chances before, and you never took them. What makes this time any different?" He shifted in his seat, his gaze falling to his hands. "I've had time to think, to realize how much I took you for granted. I was wrong, Sophia. I should have respected you more. I should have seen everything you were doing for this family, for the business." I looked at him, taking in his words. His apology seemed rehearsed, but that didn't necessarily make it insincere. Noah always had a way of making things sound convincing when he needed to. He'd spent years perfecting his charm. "I don't need your apology," I said firmly. "It's not about that anymore. This isn't about me needing your approval or your validation. It's about me finally taking control of my own life and my own future. You can apologize until you're blue in the face, but nothing will change the fact that I've claimed my place here." Noah's face tightened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his usually unshakable confidence. "You're right, I've been selfish. I've always thought I was the one who deserved this, who deserved the business, the recognition, but after everything, I see now that you were the one who was always there. You were the one who held everything together while I took it all for granted." His words, as true as they seemed, still stung. I had spent years trying to be the person everyone could count on, the one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart, but it wasn't enough. I had to fight for my place, fight for my future. I took a deep breath and looked him square in the eyes. "You weren't wrong about one thing, Noah. I did deserve this. I earned it. You may not like how it happened, but I'm not sorry. I can't keep living in your shadow or Dad's. I'm building something for myself, and I'm not looking back." He looked down at the floor, the weight of my words settling in. "I get it. I really do. I don't know how to fix things between us, between the family." I stared at him, my thoughts momentarily drifting to what we had once shared as siblings, before the business, before the power struggles. "I don't think it can be fixed, Noah," I said softly. "Not the way you want it to. This family is broken, and I've come to terms with the fact that I can't change that. We can't go back to how things were, but I've found my own path, and I'm not waiting for anyone's approval anymore." There was a long silence between us, thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, Noah stood up, his shoulders sagging, but his expression softer than I'd seen in a long time. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong about you, about everything." I nodded, watching him walk toward the door. As he opened it, he paused, then turned back to me. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sophia. I really do." "I already have," I replied, my voice steady, and with that, he was gone. Just like that, our relationship had been shattered beyond repair. I couldn't keep pretending that family would ever be the same. There was no going back, but I was okay with that. In fact, I was more than okay. For the first time, I was free. As the door closed behind him, I sat back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. The weight of the conversation, the decision, the truth, it was heavy, but it felt like a weight that had finally been lifted. I had claimed my independence, and I would never apologize for it again. It was a chilly morning when I decided to visit my mother's grave. The weight of everything that had happened, the reveal of the will, the struggles with my father and Noah, the quiet battles I'd fought within the company, had left me feeling worn, even though I'd made progress. I needed to connect with her, to tell her everything I had done and where I was headed. I arrived at the cemetery just as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the trees. The quiet was soothing, and the air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. I stood in front of her headstone, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't quite name. It had been over a year since her passing, but it felt like she had never truly left me. In many ways, her presence still loomed large in my life, especially now as I was finally stepping into the role she had always known I could fill. "I did it, Mom," I whispered, placing a hand gently on the cold stone. "I'm doing what you always knew I could." A lump formed in my throat as I spoke, the words coming out softer than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I had missed her guidance, how much I had longed for her approval, but in this moment I realized that the validation I needed had to come from within. I wasn't doing this for anyone else anymore. This was my journey. I stood there for a while, just breathing in the peace that surrounded me. The weight of everything had been heavy, but now it felt like it was finally lifting, piece by piece. "I know it's not easy," I continued, "but I've started making the changes. I've started building something real, something that will make a difference." In the time since the public reveal, I had begun to build not only a better company, but also a better version of myself. The changes I had implemented within Hale Imports were already showing results. Higher employee satisfaction, improved efficiency, a growing sense of camaraderie. I'd even started meeting with community leaders to discuss potential partnerships that could give back to those who had supported us along the way. But there was something more I had to do, something that would honor my mother's legacy in a way that no one else could. It was something she had always believed in, empowering others. "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said softly, as though she might hear me. "I'm going to set up a scholarship fund in your name, for women who need a hand up, for women who want to build something for themselves, but haven't had the chance yet." I felt a sense of pride wash over me as I said it aloud, the idea finally coming to life in my mind. I wanted to give women the opportunities that I had worked so hard to create, to make sure they had a space to grow, just as I had. It wasn't about corporate success or power. It was about legacy, about real change. I stepped back from the grave and took a long, steadying breath. I felt more connected to her than I had in a long time, her memory and love guiding me forward. "I'll make sure they know your strength, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I'll make sure they know that your love and your belief in me are the reasons I've gotten this far." I turned away from the grave, the sun now fully illuminating the cemetery, and I felt something within me click into place. My mother had always believed in me, even when I hadn't believed in myself. She had always seen my potential, even when I had been overlooked by the family I thought would support me, and now I could see it too. I had done something that they never expected. I had claimed my place, not just in the company, but in the world. I was creating my own legacy, one that would endure long after the boardroom battles and the family squabbles were forgotten. As I walked away from the grave, I knew the path ahead would never be easy, but for the first time, I felt a sense of fulfillment. My future was mine to shape, and I had the strength to do it. I was ready for whatever came next, and most importantly, I was ready to keep building. The bright lights of the summit stage bathed me in a warmth I hadn't expected. I stood behind the podium, gazing out at the sea of faces, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries from around the world. For a moment, the weight of everything I had gone through, everything I had fought for, pressed against my chest. But then, the air shifted. My nerves steadied. This was it. This was my moment. As I stepped up to the microphone, I felt my voice resonate with an unexpected clarity. I wasn't here to appease anyone. I wasn't here to prove my worth to the people who had overlooked me. This moment wasn't for them. It was for me. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Thank you for giving me the honor of speaking today. I've spent much of my life in the shadows of others, trying to prove that I deserved a seat at the table. But today, I stand before you not as someone looking for approval, but as someone who has finally stepped into her own power." The crowd grew still, hanging on every word, and I could feel the shift in the air. The same room that had once seemed so intimidating now felt full of possibility. I had fought too long and too hard to let fear control me any longer. I was raised in a family where my worth was constantly questioned. My contributions were dismissed, and I was sidelined in favor of others who didn't have the same heart or work ethic, I continued, my words becoming sharper. For years, I believed that I wasn't enough, that I had to earn my place. But the truth is, I already had it. I just needed to recognize it for myself. The truth hung in the room like a weight. I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough. For every person who had been overlooked simply because they didn't fit the mold. I've learned that leadership doesn't come from waiting for permission, I said, my gaze sweeping across the room. It doesn't come from being liked or accepted. Leadership comes from within, from the courage to stand up and take what's yours. And sometimes, that means making difficult decisions, even if it means walking away from those who don't believe in you. I paused, letting the words settle before adding, I spent years looking for validation, for someone to tell me that I was good enough, but I've come to realize that I don't need anyone's approval. The only validation I need is my own. As I spoke, I could feel the change in the room. People were leaning in, taking note of every word. I had their attention, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly had a voice. I reclaimed my place, not because of anyone else, but because of my own belief in myself, I said, taking a breath. I believe that we all have the power to make change, to create legacies, not for others, but for ourselves. And that's why I'm here today, to show you that it's never too late to step into your own power and take control of your future. The applause came, slow at first, hesitant, and then it grew, filling the hall with a resounding acknowledgement. But this applause wasn't just for the words I had spoken. It was for the journey I had walked to get here. As I walked off the stage, a sense of fulfillment washed over me. This was the moment I had worked for, the moment where I no longer sought approval from my family, from my past, from anyone but myself. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and I would never look back.